You know, the idea of like sometimes you need to stand up to your bully. It's like, you ever seen the kid that like try the wrong kid that's like, today's the day this ends, and the bully's like, yeah, okay, I'm just gonna kick the shit out of you harder. The guy just gets kicked up. They put him in a puddle, and he's like, well, that was bad advice, Dad. Like,
yeah, it's nothing's ever so black and white. Nothing's ever so black and white. You got to stand up to your fucking bully. And it's like, oh, this guy's robbing me at gunpoint. Nah, I'm standing up to this fucking bully. And you're like, probably, you know what? Just let this guy bully you and take your wallet. So that is
there's other. Yeah, you go the best. I don't know what the best case scenario is in that thing, and that's what people go, well, what else do I do? And I go, yeah, you're right. It's a complicated question. Maybe you try to make friends with the right people. I don't know. Maybe who knows what exactly you do,
and that right. So it's like a real fucking little nuanced lane you got to fill. So like you guys are a good example of like where there's a lot of people who like lost their jobs and their lives were ruined for not following like whatever the woke ideology of the day is. But then you guys found a way to make fucking videos that are really mocking it, but they were funny enough where enough people loved it that it's like, oh, you guys actually made a big thing off of that.
Sure.
And still, there's still people who would like to ruin you if they could, but then there's also like the angle of you haven't quite given them like the excuse. A lot of people really fuck up by giving them the excuse too. Like there's this thing where a lot of people that is a solid example, but a lot of those alt-right guys, like I feel like half those kids didn't even believe the most fucked up part of the shit they were saying. No. It was just like, well, if you're gonna call me a Nazi for whatever I say, I'm just gonna be a Nazi. You call me a Nazi, then I'll just be a Nazi. And then they'll just go, you know what, Hitler was great, and then they get fucking canceled.
And then you're kind of like, are you a Nazi? And you're like, I don't even know anymore.
And then they realize they're like, oh, now I gave them the excuse for everyone to go, well, don't we have to cancel Nazis? And now you're fucking ruined and you can't get a job.
Yeah,
and all
of course,
this shit.
for like ever. And just because you like had this weird phase where you're just like...
it takes like discipline, right? And I think that the same way that certain people aren't meant to like stand up to a mob, also certain people aren't meant to have like a spotlight on them while they're kind of being manic. Like, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's like... it does take so much discipline, because you're right. You do want to, you do want to do those things, but it's like you're playing chess, not fucking hitting each other with clubs. It's like it's like if you want to do anything good artistically, at least anyway, it's going to take like tact.
Right. So it's not just about like with the example of
yelling at your wife in a fight, or what real men do is maybe just come home a little later every day for the next year.
But also not being like, okay, so you don't ever want to like be like you want to be the man in your relationship, but you also don't want to not care about what your wife is upset about. Like the correct answer is actually that you have to find like the right kind of middle ground with like all this nuance. And so with a lot of this stuff, it's like you know, with the example we were just saying, like of like standing up to the bully when a guy's mugging you at gunpoint. It's like, nope, not now.
Pick your spots.
In this scenario, the correct reaction is just to fucking concede that this guy's got you. But then at some point, when there's like a winnable fight, it might be like, no, you have to pick your battle right now and fight that guy. So that's kind of the weird thing. And then there are some people who lose their jobs.
Very much like that. Comedy is so much like that, where you're like, oh, what's the correct scenario to do in this thing? And you're like, maybe it was to like have this big blow up on this guy, and maybe it wasn't.
Yeah, and then you find that out. That's a big part of doing stand-up, is figuring out exactly where that line is, and then you go a little bit over it, and then you're like, oh, but if I come right up to it and don't cross it, then that's perfect. Then that's the perfect fucking place to be. So
a lot of times I see like people's meltdowns. It's like I don't see it as like brave. I see it as like undisciplined almost. Yeah. You know what I mean? As like like an MMA guy that starts biting the guy or something.
Yes. No, what's brave is like in comedy, like Chappelle on For What It's Worth, the How Old Is 15 Really? That's like, the joke I'm talking about? That's the perfect example of like brave. He took it right to the end of where the crowd's like, where are you going with this one? And then by the time he hits the punchline, they're like, fuck, that's hilarious.
Sure.
That's the thing. Losing the whole crowd and just like fucking being like, fuck all you fucking cunts. They're like, all right, this is weird. That's not brave, that's just undisciplined. Like
unless you're filming it to show to someone else, like unless they were like the gay.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like
and then that could be pretty cool.
Yeah, like what are you optimizing for,
right? But anyway, it's all kind of like, it's interesting how all these things kind of like, are they're kind of similar. Like there's things about comedy and like your views in the world and all of it. It's all kind of an art form in a way. But we live in really, really crazy, weird times. And that's not that it's the worst times ever. Too. There's been worse times than what we live in. These are just particularly weird times that we live in. So it's
hard to know how it's going to shake out too. That's I mean, generally you never really know, but this one you're like, this is so many unprecedented things happening simultaneously that are all like pretty large scale.
How do you think shakes out in the next 10 years? Like, is it more decentralization or is it more like what is your version? I guess probably the real answer is your like percentages of what the possibilities are. But
so I don't like. I don't like even saying like, oh, what's gonna happen, because I think it's like what's gonna happen is what people make happen. So it's the question is what people are gonna do.
You even talking like is changing those outcomes.
Right. The future isn't predetermined, and if it was, I wouldn't even fucking talk about any of this shit. Like, why would I? It's like, well, it's gonna happen anyway. I think that we almost have somewhat of a binary like split where we're either gonna have some really creepy like technocracy type shit, like
the China kind of style.
Yeah, but like kind of something like that, like where you're like, well, there's a digital government-backed currency and they can shut you off anytime, or we're going to have a massive decentralization and break up all this fucking power. And you're going to see, like, I think, like, maybe even secessionist movements where Texas breaks off, California breaks off, all these countries. And I think that's the much better outcome than, like, centralized states getting more and more power. Or we're all going to die in nuclear war within the next month.
Yes.
Which is also possible.
What are the chances of that? It's like creeping up, right?
No, I mean the U.S. government was buying the radiation pills. You see that? They were like the U.S. government literally just put in a huge order for like radiation pills.
You see them running ads in New York about what to do if a nuclear bomb explodes.
And then the things are all pretty like I can't imagine that would help.
Yeah, I mean, none of it's good. No, it's all basically
not honest either, because you're like, that's a different thing. If you're in Manhattan, there's nothing you can do because that's where they're going to strike and you're going to die instantly.
But the fact that they're running these videos like that, they're like, go inside, stay away from the windows.
Yeah, that's what it was.
And you're like, wait, what? No. So the question is, why would they even be saying that? And the only thing I can think of is that, they go, if the moment were to come, when it's announced, they want people not to panic because they're trying to get their fucking people out.
Luck.
They're trying to get their elite people to fucking flee where they need to flee. So they're like, you just go inside and just don't worry.
I mean, there
everything's
must be like you must have several hours of notice. Like if a nuke like gets fired on Manhattan, I assume it's coming from overseas or some shit.
I mean, I don't know about several hours. I think that if it was coming from Russia, I'd have to look. I know people who fucking know this shit a lot better than me. But
or like
I think like you might have 30 minutes or something like that. With what Putin claims he has, I think it'd be something like that.
And that's such a nightmare.
Now we could fucking nuke Russia from we got fucking like dual missile launchers in Poland.
Oh, for sure.
That shit we could get over to Russia quick.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Like once they're off in the air, they're all off in the air. Like this is the fucked up thing about nuclear.
If yours go off, the other ones go off.
As soon as one is launched, a whole bunch are going to be launched, and then a whole bunch are going to be launched in response, and then basically the world's over. So now I don't think that's going to happen.
Do you have a bunker?
But no, I really want one. But I don't have one yet. If you're listening, if you have a bunker for me, in the greater tri-state area, I would love a fucking seat in that bunker.
Nobody has a car in New York, so like to get out without a car of the city.
Oh, you're fucked.
When everybody's out, you're not going to get out.
If you're in
that's
New
what
York
I'm saying. But
City,
everybody's trying to like panic.
You're probably better off running than you are like driving.
You're like running away from a nuke.
Fucked. But fucking,
you aren't.
Dude, I was fucking me and Tim were talking about it on my podcast here at with Tim Dillon. We're talking about it and I fucking like I tried to like break all this shit down, and like I had a clip on Rogan that I was on that went like real viral, and like where it's like I'm going like, well, look, here's what happened, and here's why we're provoking Russia, and here's the whole history of the conflict. But like Tim just fucking he just goes, do you really care? Like it's like he just breaks it down so simply. He's like, you care about the Donbass region? Like you care who rules Donbass?
Yeah.
We want to risk nuclear war over. But the truth is that this is like the closest we've been to nuclear war since at least the 80s.
Yeah.
Like there's really never been any point where we're actually like, I mean, if you just think about it, we're like, okay, we are like actively arming a war on Russia's border.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about like fucking like miles off of Russia's border, like a few miles, like 5,000 miles from our border, like 3 miles from their border, and we're sending all these weapons in, and we're going, and Biden and the administration is going, we have to win. Yeah, we must crush them here, and they're going, you crush us here, and we will fucking nuke you. Like that's what they're saying. That's and Biden said specifically, he goes, this is not a bluff. This is not a bluff. We will launch nukes, and so. I'd still like to think the overwhelming odds are he wouldn't actually do that because fuck, the whole world's over if he does that. Right. And then you'd think like even people under him maybe just wouldn't follow the orders. Even if he was like, send the nukes, there'd be someone who's like, maybe that guy has a kid at home, you know, and it's just like, no,
there is usually like one guy that sort of stops it, right?
So that's what you hope. But the chances are a lot higher than they were in fucking 1995. For sure. You know, like a lot worse.